let's talk a little bit more about finding the area of irregular shapes. First of all, what is area? Remember, it's just the number of square units that it takes to cover an area or to cover a shape. I have a picture here of one that gives us a grid to help us find the area of this figure. So for this one, I've already broken it up for us into rectangle A and rectangle B so that we can look at each part. Let's look at A first. We can see that A has 1, 2, 3 rows, and in each row there are 1, 2, 3, 4 squares. So we can say that area A has dimensions of 3 units by 4 units, or 3 rows of 4. So that would look like 3 times 4 for the area of rectangle A, and we know 3 times 4 is 12. Now let's look at rectangle B. We can see that rectangle B also has 1, 2, 3 rows, and each one of those rows has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 units. So we have one row of 8 units, another row of 8 units, and another row of 8 units. Or we have 3 rows of 8 units. So that would look like 3 times 8. And if we needed to, if we didn't remember that fact yet, we could count them, or we could do repeated addition. But remember, by now we really need to know our multiplication facts, so that would be a good thing for you to be practicing while you're at home. So let's think about 3 times 8. 3 times 8 is 24. Now, how would we find the area of A and B together? We would just add them up. 12 plus 24. And when I add 12 plus 24, 2 plus 4 is 6, 1 plus 2 is 3, I get 36. So that's 36 square units, because if we counted, there would be 36 squares covering this shape. This gray shape has 36 squares to cover it, so we call it square units for area. So let's look at this problem together. This is actually an old star released question from many years ago, and I thought it would be a good one to look at because it combines a couple of skills that you guys have been using. So it says Denise planted a flower garden with a rectangular section and a square section as shown, and it asks us what is the total area of the garden in square feet. So in this problem, we're told that each one of these squares represents 1 square foot. Now, you've been working on area problems where you're only given the squares to look at down one side and across the top or across the bottom, where you're not given the whole grid. And a lot of you have practiced drawing that grid if you need to do that. But remember, we can also just use the multiplication fact. So let's look at that today. This shape has already been broken into 2 parts for us, a rectangular section and a square section. So we're going to call them A and B, just like we did in the first problem we did together. So let's look at A first. Let's see how many rows there are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 rows. And how many squares are in each row? 1, 2, 3, 4. So we can look at A and say that A has the dimensions of 10 by 4, or 10 rows of 4 square feet. So now let's multiply. 10 times 4, we know that's 40, and in this problem, because we're given the unit, it's square feet instead of square units. Now let's look at B. For square B, we're told it's a square, and we know that a square means all sides have the same length. So let's look. We know there are 1, 2, 3, 4 rows, and if it's a square, then we also know that each row has 1, 2, 3, 4 units in it. Let's figure out the area of square B. We know that it has 4 rows and each one of those rows has 4 units in it. So 4 rows of 4 is 16 square feet. Now, how do we find the total area? Well, to find the total area, we need to combine the area of section A of the garden and the area of section B of the garden. So area of section A was 40 square feet. Area of section B of the garden was 16 square feet. And if I add those two together, 40 plus 16, I get 56 square feet. So my total area of the garden in square feet is 56 square feet. And I'm just abbreviating that. SQ means square, and FT is an abbreviation for feet. Let's try another one together. Now this one, we're not given the line to break this into 2 rectangles, but it does tell us, look at the problem. The diagram represents the floor of a storage building. The floor is composed of 2 rectangles. What is the area of the floor in square yards? So do we have to use square units in this one? No, we'll label it square yards because we're told every square is 1 square yard. So we have 2 choices here. We can break it up 2 different ways. I could break it up by drawing a line here, or I could break it up by drawing a line here. Let's do it both ways and see if we get it right both ways. Let's see if we get the same answer both ways. Let's start by breaking it right here. And we're going to call this A and this B. Now let's look at A. I don't know. How many rows do we have? Well, remember, this part of our drawing is the same size as if this row was right here. So we could still look at it and say there are 1, 2, 3, 4 rows. And in each row, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 yards. So we have 4 rows and each one is 7 yards. 4 times 7 is 28 square yards. Now let's look at B. In B, we can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rows, and each row has 1, 2 squares in it, 2 square yards. So we have 7 times 2, which we know is 14. And then we would add together 28 square yards plus 14 square yards is 42 square yards. I'm going to write that down over here. And then let's do it again, breaking it up the other way and see if we get the same answer. So let's break it up the other way and see if we break it up this way, if we get the same answer, if it makes it a little easier or a little tougher. So let's talk about if we break it up this way and we call this A and this B. Do you think we'll get the same answer? Let's think about that. So let's look at A. We're going to start by figuring out how many rows are there. In A, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 rows. And each one of those rows has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 square yards. So for A, we would say 4 times 9, and that is 36 square yards. Now let's look at B. B has 1, 2, 3 rows. And each one of those rows has 1, 2 square yards in it. So we would say B has 3 times 2, which is 6 square yards. And then we would add them together, 36 plus 6, to give me the total area in square yards, 42 square yards. So look at that. Whether we did it broken up the way we just did it or broken up the way we did it the first time, we got the same answer both times. That was our goal. Here's your challenge. I think you can figure out the area of each one of these figures. So you'll want to pause your video so you can look at each one of these figures and be ready to tell your teacher the area and the perimeter of the blue shape, the green shape, and the gray shape.